right. Welcome to Factor Theory Live. Excuse me. It is 6:03. It is December 29th, and that was a killer band called Judas Priest, Electric Eye. It's been really trippy. I've been listening to the other shows on the network a lot the last couple of days especially, and everybody has got theories, because that's pretty much all we can have is theories, thesis, and about what's going on. Especially a lot of people are starting to wake up now and realize there's something going on. It seems to be that this could be a place that was actually created by Lucifer, and we're in a pocket dimension that was created by Lucifer. That's the only thing that makes sense as to lunacy that we're seeing in this day and age. And it's been making me wonder about the supernatural. And me and Mr. Rowe's here with us tonight as well. We had been talking before about ghosts, and Rowe has some stuff he's going to be showing me. And our other guest, Robert Morningstar, is here with us as well. How's it going, Robert?
Oh, it's going well. I'm happy to be here. Happy to be with you and Mr. Rowe.
Nice, fantastic. Yeah, and you were telling me some trippy stuff about your experiences. So lucky for me, I've had head injuries and my memory is not so great. So I remember some highlights, but I would love it if you could get into the first paranormal story that you were telling me that you had when we talked on Christmas.
I think we went through several. Would it have been one of
I think it was maybe 81, the one you were talking about in 81.
Oh, the ghost experience. That was a life-altering experience, yes. I had a near-death experience on the day that Ronald Reagan was shot, and a ghost came out of a wall at Oberlin College where I was teaching in the East Asian Studies Department. I was a visiting lecturer from New York. And Reagan had been shot, and I was lying in bed. I always sleep naked, if I can. If it's not 2 degrees below zero like it was last weekend. And so I just pulled up the sheets over myself, and my peripheral vision saw something, and there was an emanation out of a wall, a white figure. It's a figure in white from head to foot. White robe with a white cincture, a white headdress, and a shroud over the face, like a funeral shroud. And it walked across the room really, really in slow motion, giving me a lot of time to get myself ready. And I had a train of thoughts as this being was approaching me. And the first thing I thought from his bearing and the power that emanated from him, I said, this is the most powerful person that's ever walked the earth. And as he got closer and closer, footstep by footstep, really slow motion, I said to myself, because my consciousness was split in fragments of identity. And I said, he knows I'm scared, but he's trying to approach me in a way as not to frighten me. He knows I'm scared. He's approaching me with a Tai Chi walk. For those of you who don't know, I've been practicing Tai Chi for 50 years and have been teaching it for the last 45.
You're essentially a master at it, correct?
Yes, I have been acknowledged as a Tai Chi master by the Hong Kong Tai Chi Masters Association. And actually the highest ranking masters of China acknowledged me in 1986. So my life is really tied up with Tai Chi and spirituality and spiritualism. This is what we're talking about right now, spiritualism. The ability to contact and be contacted by souls, spirits, interdimensional beings. For me, they are all extraterrestrials, aliens, demons, jinns, ghosts, fairies, spooks, whatever. So as this being is approaching me, my body is going into panic and losing body heat. And he's coming closer and closer with this steady, gliding pace. comes across the foot of my bed, and now my heart is racing. It's about to explode out of my chest. So as he was approaching me, I thought back to 7 years before, again, to bring you up on my background in spiritual training. I was basically adopted by a Tai Chi master and a grandmaster and invited to teach Tai Chi. And when the grandmaster died, his ghost came to see me, and he frightened me then. It really is an otherworldly experience. Mm-hmm. But when I became frightened then, he said to me, "Don't be afraid, Robert. Nothing can harm you." And I accepted that as an affirmation that I have divine protection, and that at that moment I was being protected and nothing to fear. So I seized on that. And I actually went back to that moment, and I felt all the love that I had felt at that moment. And that spirit came. It was really full of love and radiant, universal love. So I started saying to this ghost, "I love you, but I don't want to see your face." That became my mantra. I love you, but I don't want to see your face. I love you, but I don't want to see your face. And I was crying. I mean, my voice would have sounded very meek at the moment, which I was. Just bearing the magnitude of such an event in my life, and with me wide awake. I mean, this is not dream, this is not sleep, this is not remote viewing, lucid dreaming. This is wide awake, crystal conscious reality. So he's coming across the foot of my bed, and my body goes into another state of terror. As he walked across the foot of my bed, I noticed my heart wanted to explode out of my chest, and I looked down in my chest, heaving, almost exploding, and I said, "My God, it's as if I have a shell of concrete keeping my heart in my chest, otherwise it just explode or run out of the room." Turns the foot of my bed, and I said, "This is death. This is death. This is why they find people asleep, dead in the morning, and say, 'Oh, he died in his sleep.'"
Right.
Yeah, that's why. So, and then he's coming closer, and then I had a series of thoughts. Wow, this is antimatter. What's he made of, right? It's getting really close. He's really not quite concrete, but he's really there. Right? Mm-hmm. So my physical, scientific mind tries to make an explanation. I said, "God, this is antimatter. He's made of antimatter, and unbelievably cold. I felt as if I had been taken naked as I was and thrown out into Antarctica. In winter. My life force was just being sucked out of me. And he comes over and stands on my right side, right next to me, in my bed, looming over me, white from head to foot, and the shroud. And he starts to bend over, and I thought that he was going to lift the veil. And I said to him, "Please, I'm really strong, but please, don't lift the veil. I don't think I can take it. If you lift the veil, I'm sure I'm going to die. Please don't lift the veil." So what he did is he pressed the veil against his throat, or against his face. And as he leaned over, I could see through it, and I saw I would have to say, the most powerful face that I've ever seen. And he came almost nose to nose. If you put your hand 4 inches away from your nose, that's how close he came, facing me, face to face. Eyeball to eyeball. Although I could not see his eyes through the veil, I could feel them. And he said to me, "Behold my face, remember me." And I said to him, "Who are you? Who are you? Could you be the Christ? Could you be my soul? Could you be the soul of a Sufi master that I know?" Because he was dressed in white, and I associated it with Islam, but it wasn't Islamic. And then he said again, and this time it was a different tone. He said, "Behold my face, remember me." The first utterance was a request. The second one was a command. It was imperative. And again I said, "Who are you? I know you, but I haven't seen you in so long." That's what I had said the first time after I said those 3 possibilities of his identity. "Who are you? I know you, but I haven't seen you in so long." So he gives me the command, "Behold my face, remember me." And I said again, who could you be? Then he said to me, we don't want you speaking to people of what you know. And I was taken aback, said, me? Where are you coming from? I'm wondering, is he threatening me? Where are you coming from? And he said, Lucifer has taken over Islam and is going to use it as his vehicle to destroy mankind. And I thought, oh, I understand. When I thought, didn't utter it, but I said, I understand. He just nodded a little bit and stood up, turned around, walked out with the same steady, slow motion, methodical gait, turned the foot of my bed, and my legs were freaking out. And the parts of me that were closest to him were in utter terror. I could actually hear screams from each of my cells, my mortality, screaming.
That's terrible.
Yeah, and I looked down at my body and I thought, I feel sorry for you. It was pitiful. And this is what I mean, that this experience fragmented my mind into mind, body, soul, and spirit. And body was just a craven mass of quivering jelly and rattling bones and internal screeches. And then the rest of me, the rest of us, got it together. And we held ourselves together by surrounding ourselves, me, myself, and I. When you ask about, people like to talk about preferred pronouns these days. So when people, I say me, myself, and I. So that was, and so it took 13 years to resolve this mystery of who this person was. And it led me on a quest for many, many years to understand how he could say that Lucifer had taken over Islam. But it became self-evident. This was March 30th, 1981, but over the next 10 years, it became self-evident that something malefic and horrific had taken over Islam. And through inciting hatred and terrorism, and, that it was leading the world in a really terrible direction. So, ultimately, to make the long story short, it took me 14 years to realize the identity of that person. And in the end, it turned out to be John F. Kennedy. The ghost of John F. Kennedy came to me on the night that Ronald Reagan was shot.
That's so
outraged to the deep state that tried to do it again after doing John and Martin, Robert, and the deep state once again tried it on Reagan. And I think that outrage brought him to me because I had a great filial affection for John F. Kennedy that went on after his death. And what he showed me, the reason I couldn't recognize his face was he showed me his face with a peculiar expression. And the expression turned out to be the same expression on the single photograph of Officer Tippit that the world had seen in 33 years. And so they planted this vision, I guess you would call it. They planted it in my subconscious with that unbelievable expression, kind of surly, kind of angry, very grave. Not a happy soul.
I guess not.
And so by showing me the expression of his face with the expression that was on Tippett's face on this only photograph, 13 years later, I found the photograph, began investigation, and realized, oh my God, all of those photographs of President Kennedy in the morgue are not President Kennedy. They are actually Officer J.D. Tippit, who was practically, I would say, a fraternal twin President Kennedy in his appearance, his physiognomy.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, that's it.
Wild.
That's why I like to say that John F. Kennedy is the only man who ever solved his own murder. And he used me as a medium. And that's the God's honest truth. My psychic skills led me on. Everyone is born for a reason, and That happens to be one of mine.
I believe that. Brody, you got anything to say about that story?
Hey, Robert, how are you doing, my friend?
Hello, Mr. Rowe. A pleasure to hear your voice and to thank you on the air for all the great work you do to keep my show going.
My pleasure.
To get
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. It's an honor. Yeah, that's a very interesting story. I mean, it's kind of mind blowing, actually.
Yeah, well, it's a secret that I've kept all these years, but now I'm 74 years old, and I don't give a hoot. This is the truth. The job is done. Last week, I did a program with Richard Hoagland. Of all things, for Christmas Eve, he calls me up and he said, "I got a great show for Christmas Eve." And I said, "What's that?" He goes, "Well, you and I, just the two of us, we're going to do the John F. Kennedy assassination." I said, "What? On Christmas Eve?" He said, "Yes, it's going to be our gift to the country and the world. We're going to free them from the delusions. We're going to tell them the absolute truth." And that's the way I feel. It was a very good program, and it's probably running on his website, The Other Side of Midnight. Anyway, that's the God's honest truth, and I'm very happy to share it. You know, I kept the secret since 1981. I actually withdrew. This thing almost killed me, you know. It really rattled my whole life. I went into shock for quite a long time. And then, so I withdrew from public appearances and public lectures, and I devoted myself to really understanding the roots of the world's major religions and how they intersected, and how it came about that Luciferism could travel into Islam, out of Islam, into the Templars, into the Masons, out of the Masons, into the Sabbateans, into the Frankists, into the Catholic Church, into the United Nations, into the United States, and take over everything. As you said at the opening, I was quite surprised that you're speaking. It looks like we are in some pocket hologram created by Lucifer.
Pocket dimension.
That's what we're dismantling, you know, me by telling you this. And Mr. Rowe. Mr. Rowe, I enjoyed your program on Tuesday immensely. I was listening to Feather. And then, you come on after, so I've sat in. I enjoyed that program very much.
Oh, thank you very much. Talking about the pocket dimension, if anybody's interested, I did a show on April Fool's Day, April 1st, a reality extraction, last year, 2021. And that was what I thought about how karma kind of works and reincarnation, and that it's possible, in my opinion, that this is the equivalent to a cosmic playground that the owner and caretaker has gone a little bit crazy and locked the playground up, and everybody that's inside the fake haunted house now is told the haunted house is real, and we all have amnesia. And the free universe is out there, and there's things going on out there that we should be part of. And what I believe has gone on a cosmic scale is we as creator beings created somehow in the cosmos a simulation where we could incarnate and experience, all the feelings of flesh and blood and incarnation. And it was supposed to be kind of like a vacation or a holiday retreat, but something went terribly wrong, and the simulation got out of control and has locked its creators within. Yes. And so we are stuck in this, wheel of rebirth over and over. And there is a possibility to break out of this and go back to the free universe, which will ultimately happen because we are eternal beings anyway. But for the meantime, we're stuck in this birth cycle. And but if anybody's interested in me going in total depth of that and how I believe in how karma actually really works, because it's kind of a scam in this fraud universe that we're stuck in, April 1st of 2021, reality extraction. I talk about that, but that's my own personal opinion.
That's
Well,
really
it's a valid opinion. And, your description reminds me of what Edgar Casey said about the entrapment of souls in the body, that it was kind of like a Disneyland for spirits, as you said, like Westworld. Come in and take a vacation, experience, and then go away. But Edgar Casey said that they kept coming into incarnation and got harder and harder to extract themselves from it. Eventually, we got bound.
Yeah, when you think about it, because the physical realm that we're in is a very, well, you could say it's very finite, it's very viscous in terms of, the different realms that we experience. I've been having really vivid dreams, and we have the astral realm that we can visit, but this supposedly stable reality, maybe there's something to that. If we come back and we get too attached to this stable flesh physic reality, then it becomes easier to stay here and harder to, ultimately escape in some fashion. I guess it's kind of like drinking too much or taking too much of an addictive drug, maybe.
Well, that could be as well. There's this guy, he wrote a really trippy book about it. His name is Howard McCoskey. I'm going to try to get him on the show. But I want to play a little clip because this is getting right into what we're talking about right now. So I want to play a little clip from him. And his theories are very in sync with my own. This is about the AI realm that we're in.
So who is controlling things? Who did make this matrix of illusions?
This is my opinion, right? So this is, and it's always, everything I'm saying is a thesis. Can't 100% prove anything. It's all a thesis, and but it seems now to me that the allegory that this is a realm, and in fact, I'll call whatever you want to call the creator of this realm, I'm going to call it more like a computer AI type of intelligence, because there is, and we can talk about all of these concepts of simulated realities and computer concepts of how reality seems to work. And again, I'm not saying it is a simulation. I'm not saying it is a computer, but I'm saying it's a good metaphor for our discussion, right? And what's interesting is, if you think of the vast, and when we talk about Plato's cave again, I'm not talking about the material realm. Plato's cave is this realm, the etheric realm, the astral realm, the angel realm, the super duper realm, the whatever realm you can think of where duality can, even the void is even in Plato's cave. So it's a vast, and we don't know how many caves there are, how many material realms there are, how many, universes there are within. There may be Plato's caves and Plato's caves and Plato's caves. That's a massive amount of power to generate, to run such a creation. It would make sense, and it would need a massive power source. It would make sense if you could find a way to, in a sense, have the characters of your video game generate the power that the game needs to keep running, so that you don't have to have any kind of exterior plug to ever plug in the computer. The characters in the game, you might say, generate, they have experiences that you're able to pull the power out, put it back in your system, and keep it running. This leads to Robert Monroe's ideas of loosh, and in a sense that this is a type of farm to harvest energy. And to me, that makes sense. But it's not so much that I think the people will say, "Oh, archons are eating the energy for themselves, and it's a power structure," and it kind of, but it's more. I think it's literally being put back in the system, because if the system runs out of power, just like your computer, if you run out of power, it'll just shut down. It ends. The simulation ends. So all of the beings who are part of the simulation, all the things that are, and that includes the potential of non-player characters, all the things that are in our realm that are not what you might call elements of the divine, elements of things outside of this creation, they need the simulation to keep running. So even though you might say this particular being is taking energy from whatever for itself, the system will still be taking the energy from that being too and putting it back into the computer and keeping it running. And I think one level, that's what we might be at now. We're talking about the Great Reset. And the Great Reset can be, to me, it can be two different things. It can be one, a time loop where we're coming to a particular end and we're literally going to loop back 100, 1,000, 500, whatever the time loop is. We're going to loop back, and that'll be the reset, because reset usually means going to zero somehow, right? The other way we can look at this is, he's got something. Yeah.
Man, these matrix things are crazy. I just interviewed the retired president of Monroe Institute.
Wow, that does sound pretty.
Yeah.
Set in the matrix. So, you ever heard the saying, art mimics reality and reality mimics art?
Totally.
Something in there reminded me of what I said, that as this ghost was approaching me, I felt all my energy was being drawn out of me. And it's as if my energy was producing him, or he was sapping it. Interesting that Whitley Strieber, in his book Communion, touched on a very interesting subject. I thought it was a brilliant book, especially for this concept. He said, trying to explain this interaction with interdimensionals, he said, perhaps there is a technology on the other side of death that makes it possible for them to open a window into our reality, come and interact for a while, but they can't stay here, and so must go back through the window. A technology on the other side of death. That was incredible. And I said to myself, well, what would you have on the other side of death but absolute cold? If life, our bodies are hot, we're alive, what the first thing they do when they think a body is deceased, after checking for a pulse, is touch for temperature. If it's cold, it's dead. So perhaps coldness and super cold is part of the technology. And later on, I discovered the existence of something just called Beck, the Bose-Einstein condensate, which is this cloud of atoms that congeals and lines up perfectly north to south under certain conditions, but the conditions require very close to absolute zero in order to condense it, and then they keep it under control with a magnetic field. So I thought, these years later, I thought it was antimatter then, but it could have been Beck being created and controlled electromagnetically. What do you think of that, Mr. Rowe? Mr. Rowe, you have an amazing collection of ectoplasmic beings, shall I call them, orbs and ghosts and spirits that went through your apartment. And I saw the video that you and Stephen did. I must commend you. It's really, really well done. You want to talk about that? Because I think these two fields overlap.
Yeah, and let me also, interject about, communication with things on the other side. I'll tell you a story in a second, my own personal story, that's kind of helped make me what I am, I guess, in a way.
Actually, that's what I wanted to do, get a story from you, and then we can get into everything that Robert was just talking.
And it's interesting because when I was working in the defense industry, in space and defense, there's some kind of a few interesting conversations I've had with some of the guys that would talk about, very vaguely, of course, the other departments working on technological means to enter into other realms of existence, whether it's enter to look into someone's dreams by putting something on their head, or trying to actually work with, old rites and technology to open up portals into other realms. But there was something that used to happen to me when I was a child, and it followed me around for years, is at night when I would go to sleep, I would wake up in the middle of the night, calmly walk out to my hallway, face the bathroom, which was right at the end of the hallway, and standing there in the doorway would be the shadow hat man. Sometimes just a silhouette of a tall shadow. Sometimes it would be like the silhouette of the tall shadow with like a fedora hat on. And I would be calm. I wouldn't be scared. And I'd stand there, and it would come over and reach out to me, and it would push me out of my body, and I would fall backwards, and I'd see myself standing there as I fell out of my body. And when I fell back down, I'd get to a certain point and then feel this pull, and I'd go right snap back into my body again. The shadow would be gone, and I would calmly go back to sleep. And this would happen for years until about when I entered puberty is when it stopped. And there was only one other time I had a negative experience with the shadow is after a friend of mine from Greece told me about his grandfather's book, this old book from Greece. And I always begged him to show it to me. And he would be like, it's at the house, blah, blah, blah. One time we were sitting in his driveway. And I said, hey, the book. Let me go get the book. I want to really see this. And he was like, So he finally decided, okay, you go and get it. He brings this book out. It's this big, thick, leather-bound with weird symbols on it, book written in Greek. And he hands it to me. And it was so cold, I remember the exact words I said. I said, would you take this out of the freezer? I mean, because it was that cold, like it was ice. I'm like, this is unnatural. And he's all, no, man, that's the book. And I'm like, okay. So I opened the book up and I'm looking at it. It's got interesting symbols and letters and things. And I'm, not comprehending any of it. And then I start to feel a little bit woozy. So I didn't even attribute it to the book. I just thought I started feeling sick. So I gave it back to him. I said, okay, can you take me home? Yeah, okay, he takes me home. I walk into my bedroom. It's really cold for some reason. Unnaturally cold. The rest of the house was normal. I turn around to turn on the light because it was really dark. And as I turn around, right at eye level, just a few inches away, I see two red eyes staring at me. I mean, that is the most fear that I've ever felt in my life, bar none. And even until this day, I've never been more scared of anything. Just the feeling was there of fear. I dove for the light switch, and the eyes were gone. But I mean, the room started to warm up after a few minutes, so I didn't sense that presence there anymore. It was just there for a split second, and later on, I kind of attributed maybe it was connected to this strange book. And I mean, I started to feel better and everything. Slept with the light on that night. But I've had a few of those interesting encounters, and those are just some of the more memorable ones. That was the most memorable, frightening, negative one I've ever had. And then, of course, the shadow thing would just follow me around. And I never knew what quite to make of it. Sometimes I think it was trying to teach me something, but I can't be sure if it was trying to push me out of my body so we could go in. I don't know.
Yeah, that's pretty wild, man.
But I didn't feel the fear from the shadow, so that's why I feel it was more of a guide or something. But
kind of like Doctor Strange, that movie. When they
I'm sorry. This is a lesson.
I didn't catch that, Robert. Can you say?
I said every experience is a lesson in interdimensional communication with spirits, jinns. It sounds like you had an encounter with a jinn, the red-eyed ones.
Yeah, probably.
They're evanescent creatures, beings. Sometimes they will manifest visually, but they are the ones that can actually, as you said, bump you out and step in. That's another experience. The experience of a walk-in, being a shaman. You channel, and sometimes the spirits will attach themselves to you for one reason or another. Usually for help, assistance in solving a problem that they didn't solve while they were alive, and that can help a lot of people. And you can release spirits from the hold, because my friend Paul Schroeder has a protocol. He's a very gifted psychic. He was an abductee at the age of 7 in Brooklyn, but he also has a lot of experiences with ghosts. So he wrote an essay called Ghost Rescue. And he said that when you encounter a ghost, you should try to help him. First thing you should try to do is explain to him that he shouldn't be there. Mm-hmm. You're not here. You're dead. You don't belong here. I know you're not happy. Let's find a way to get you where you belong. And he's a very creative guy. And so we have to have open minds.
Mm-hmm.
If not,
especially when it comes to the spirits of children, like Dave Schrader, we were talking about him too. He's going to be on next week. He does the show, The Holzer Files, and they have a psychic, Cindy Geza, and they're great. Like
if they run into the spirit of a child, especially, they try to cross it over rather than just going, oh, wow, there's the spirit of a child there. They're hearing this thing cry. Dave starts crying on camera, and you can tell it's genuine. It's not just for the camera. Because I started crying. Every time I hear a child on one of those EVPs, especially a baby crying, because that baby has no way of understanding. It's trippy, and that's why it's going to be great to have Dave on next week. Yeah. Still waiting to hear back from him. I want to do a show with the two of you and Dave, and if possible, Cindy. I think that would be fantastic.
Well, I'd like to say that really this is the normal world. We're calling it paranormal just because the others can't perceive it. But I think that this is the natural state of consciousness. And that it's the gift that God gave us that we can transcend dimensions. Not only can we transcend atmospheres, we're the only creature that I know of on Earth, natural to Earth, that can subsist and exist underwater in the atmosphere and then go on into outer space. So I look upon my body as a spacesuit that my spirit is wearing so that I can operate here on the surface of this planet under an ocean of oxygen. And,
at this density.
Yeah, it's like a remote probe.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it attaches, and you know what? As long as we're talking metaphysics, my belief is that oxygen is the conscious agent in our bodies. That oxygen is conscious, and it wears our bodies like a diver wears a diving suit. And through our bodies, oxygen perceives through the different modalities of our senses. So
that's what led you to that
in my body.
Well, that's interesting because it's one of the elements that are composed of with water, which is one of the basic elements, and it's also what we're made of. And then you have the work that has been done by Emoji, I think was the guy's name, and how water has been found to possibly have some sort of consciousness, but it definitely has a memory. It's like an archive, and so can you imagine what the oceans must hold?
Mm-hmm. Water has a memory and it makes choices.
Yeah.
Which way to run. So it's a fascinating thing. And yes, we wrote to the water, the living water. What is it that gets into the water in the human body that makes that water conscious and the other water inert or less conscious? Those are the mysteries that we have to resolve.
And it makes sense with the vaccinations because we're made up of so much water, and water has these incredible properties. It also explains why they're sticking us with vaccinations to try to dilute that water so that we can't access the miracle or the magic or whatever you want to call it.
Right. I was talking about C.S. Lewis last night to a friend in Canada that I think the most important book he ever wrote was actually a book called Miracles, where it's a very short book where he argues that we are invested with miraculous powers and that we have to just assert them, that much of the fall of man involves the loss of divine consciousness, and that when that consciousness is sparked once again by faith in ourselves and in the cosmic Christ, that we are invested with the same powers to create miracles that he promised. He said, greater things than these will you do in my name. And so that his argument, C.S. Lewis' argument, is that when Christ did miracles, he broke the laws of nature. He broke the laws of the old creation, and he established new laws. And because God is just, when Christ asserted those powers, he was asserting them not just in changing the laws of the universe from the old universe to the new universe, but thereby investing all of humanity with the same powers. It's a brilliant little book and very important. When you believe you can do it, you can do it.
Yeah. I've always felt that way. So I can remember just 1977 and seeing Star Wars and them using the Force. That concept it wasn't amazing to me. It made sense. It was but why can't we still do that? I was thinking that from
from the time I was first watching that movie. It's always, I can remember sitting there trying to mentally make a cup come to my hand all the time and stuff. It was like, I should be able to do this. I'm like 7, right? So that makes total sense that it is essentially the Force. There is, like, for simple terms, for people who don't want to go all New Age or whatever, that's essentially what it is. And even intuition and stuff like that, we're picking up on a little bit of the abilities, just a tip of the iceberg of the abilities, the things that we are truly capable of. It's insane.
Well, I think it's the natural order of the universe, and the biggest trick of Lucifer has been to make us doubt ourselves and to believe that he has any power to give. That's really, it reverses the entire design of the universe. If you go into metaphysics or theology or mythology, Lucifer is supposed to serve man, and that's his rebellion. He hates man for that reason. But that implies that man has much more power than he has. So the trick is that he appeals to people, luring them under the idea that he has some power to offer or some license to kill, to sin, to do evil. And that's a fallacy. So the idea is, you have to tell Lucifer and Satan what to do, and we're not subject to evil spirits unless we open ourselves to them. So that's a very important thing to consider. So how has it happened is, we're talking about who's in control. The moment you asked that question, I said to myself, an artificial intelligence is in control. And that is the embodiment of Lucifer. Mm-hmm. People that say to me, what do you mean Lucifer? What do you mean Satan? They don't exist. And I said, Lucifer is intelligence without love. And Satan, passion without any reason. And the best example of intelligence without love is communism and Nazism. They took intelligence and logic to the nth degree and committed the most heinous crimes in the names of reason and logic. So we have to be very careful about our own thinking. I often say to people, a couple of times a day as you're ruminating through the day and thoughts are racing through your mind, stop and say to yourself, is this thought truly my own? Or am I parroting, echoing, or receiving a beam, putting this thought in my head? Same thing goes for emotions.
Every day I wonder that. Go ahead, Ro.
I think Robert was. What were you finishing up, Robert?
About how we have to manage our emotions and our thinking, and really consider whether the thought in our heads is really our own, because so much of it is the hive mind. I go into the New York subway system, and there'll be 25 people in the subway car, and 23 of them will have these iPhones or smartphones, and it was pathetic. I was in a car, and this one was 15 people. I make a point of counting how many are in and how many are. So there are 20 people in the car, and 15 people had the phone. And I look at this baby in a stroller, and the baby had the phone.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes, man. I said, I'm crying for this kid.
I remember when I was in my commuting days, when I used to take the BART train to San Francisco, and I just have to sit there for an hour in the mornings. I would notice, because this was back in the 90s, I would notice everybody was reading a paper at that time. And I thought to myself, wow, nobody's communicating. They're all lost in the newspaper. Now, nobody's reading the newspaper. They all have their phones. And
right. In those days, it was they were absorbing information, and now it's imagery with a lot of subliminal suggestion.
Exactly. Yeah. And what was a weird parallel is I was watching this video of the bad part of I think it was like Philadelphia or whatever, like a street view of driving through Philadelphia. And it shows all the unfortunate people, the junkies and homeless and just down on their luck people on the sides. And they were all fiddling with something. And it wasn't a phone. It was a lot of times it was drugs. But the parallels of just fiddling with something in your hands, whether it's like getting your shot of fentanyl or heroin or looking at your telephone, they were all entranced and engulfed in their own little world, doing their own little thing, oblivious to the world around them. Yeah. And I couldn't help but make the connection of, they're two different things, but they're doing basically the same thing.
Well, it's the hijacking of consciousness that's occurring, and the literal blinding of the human race through iPhones. The human eye has a scope of 120 degrees. When you look straight ahead, and contemplate both your peripheral vision and your foveal vision, it's a 120 degree scope. When you go to foveal vision, normally it's 10 degrees of scope. But when you go down into the phone and the screen of the phone, you've reduced your visual perceptions to about 5% of the potential. And as I was saying on this program, my Tai Chi masters taught me to pay attention to peripheral vision because spiritual insight comes to us first. The first sign, mindfulness of your peripheral vision and receiving the information that peripheral vision is feeding you. Most people don't even know they have peripheral vision. And one of the ways they taught me, the Tai Chi masters taught me to perfect this skill, they told me, go to a party. And when you're in the party and you have 7, 8, 10 people there in the party, just look at a point opposite yourself, maybe a point on the wall, and just look at that point, but pay attention to everything else you're seeing. And I found that once I started using that technique, I could not only see all the conversations and interactions that were going, but I could also hear better than if I wasn't concentrating in that manner. So these are also ways of developing extrasensory skills. I got into parapsychology because of the idea of extrasensory perception. I felt I had it as a child growing up, and my family had it, and other people just were devoid of it. So I chose psychology specifically to go into the field of parapsychology. And so that's why I say that this is the real world. This world of interacting with each other and other carnal beings, on life on Earth. But this capacity for interdimensional communications on many levels, from the celestial to the infernal and back. We are incredibly gifted by nature and endowed with these powers, and we should use them.
It's interesting you talk about, I've heard what you just described actually in a professional environment as meditation on the room. And when you enter a room, meditate on the room, like pick a spot or a potted plant or something and just, take that in, but also take in everything around you, the smells, the senses, the sights, the sound, and you'd be surprised at what you notice. And then one way they used to kind of enforce that is they'd have a room set up and they'd say, go in the room, meditate on the room for a minute and then come back out. And then they'd quiz you. Okay, what color was, the picture on the wall? What did it have on it? Describe the picture on the wall. Describe the song that was playing on the radio or whatever it was. And then you go back and forth and do that until you could get to an acceptable level of meditating on the room or the environment.
Yes, that's fantastic mental training. I was just sitting here, I was thinking about it when I was a singer in bands for the longest time, and people would comment on how I was always sitting alone. Like we'd get off the stage for a break or something, and I would grab a drink, and then I would just sit there and essentially I'd be staring at the stage and sensing what's going on. Okay, that's the tough guy over there. Oh, that girl wants to kick that one's ass because she's got a crush on her boyfriend. And I'm just like assessing the situation of that guy's about to start a fight at this table. And I would walk up, move my pregnant girlfriend out of the way, sit her down beside me just in time to see somebody come over and throw the table she was sitting at, and stuff like that. It's wild.
Well, that's insight. It's insight. And it's, one of the blessings I've had is growing up in New York, and understanding body language. It's the greatest laboratory for understanding world body language. They say if you go to 42nd Street, you can't stand there 15 minutes without finding somebody from any country you could imagine, And every country and every nationality has a unique body language. The interesting thing about New York is that somehow all of those body languages have amalgamated, and New Yorkers have what I would call a universal body language. New Yorkers can interact with almost anyone on the spot.
Robert, I got to ask you a question real quick.
Sure.
Since you're a New Yorker, do you know, and you mentioned 42nd Street, do you know of a hotel that used to be there? It's kind of a flop house called the Elk?
No, I've never seen the Elk.
Okay. The reason I ask is it was like, it's closed now, but it was my first time I ever landed in New York. It was the first place I stayed.
Oh, really? It's probably
totally random.
It's probably still there in the edifice with a new facade and a different business running it.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. And but yeah, it was a $50 a night flop house that just needed for a night or two. And had a house centipede crawling out of the sewer in the middle of the night, and had to deal with that.
Fond memories of New York. No, I don't know. Let me think. You know what? You're sparking a memory, and I'm starting to see a sign in gold that was like script, and would just say ELK. I'm starting to visualize it. Goes back a long way. Yeah, my memory banks are pretty deep, and let me tell you about it. Whatever you said, it just sparked this, and I have to share it with you. In 1973, I was driving crosstown from the west side to the east side at 66th Street crosstown. Central Park is in the middle of Manhattan, so it blocks the streets, and you can only cross at certain junctures, 66th Street, 79th Street, 86th Street, 96th Street. So I'm at 66th Street, which is where Tavern on the Green is in Sheep's Meadow. So I pull up to a red light, and I'm about the second or third car back. So the buildings on both sides are framing a piece of sky and Central Park and the east side skyline. So I'm just sitting there waiting for this light, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, without a sound, this craft, it looked like a 727 Whisper jet fuselage with no tail and no wings. Just came in just like I've just done my hand. I think I did that pretty well. It came in like this. Whoop, and stopped right over Tavern on the Green. And this huge field, all of Central Park is before me and the skyline. And then it did this, and then it did this.
No, nice. Wow.
That's what it did. I perfected it, telling it over.
For those who can't see, Robert had it coming closer to him and then screwing off.
Here's the important.
Sure the commercials are starting.
Yeah. It went to a 45-degree angle and stopped, nose down, as if an airplane was going to crash right into the ground. Then it flipped.
Remember where you're at, Robert. It's the bumpers are running right now. We'll be right back with Robert Morningstar and Mr. Rowe.